again, and I say this matter was dealt with, it was investigated, the matter was even dealt with through the courts, and the decisions were made by the courts. And I was not in any of those areas as somebody who was a suspect or anything. So it is so clear that that matter has come to an end. On the issues, somebody raised an issue about Anglo leasing. Again, I can only say that it would be important to note that this matter was dealt with again in 2016. And in 2016, I was a state witness in those matters. I was not a culprit. I went and testified as a state witness. So I think I would say that that should be sufficient. On the issue of the Kenya Railways, I am happy, very happy about the Kenya Railways as a location for this office. First of all, the people who voted us in are there, alighting every morning to go to work and alighting every evening to go home. To me, I say that that is a constant reminder that whenever I go to that office, I will know that those are hard workers in our country, and therefore we must not let them down. We must work hard and improve on this country. So I am personally very delighted to be domiciled at the railway headquarters. That is perfect. I'm proud of that. Mr. Chairman, nominating people who may have contested in elections and maybe not succeeded to take up public offices is not an offense. It is perfectly constitutional, and it does not mean that because you have lost an election that you cannot be helpful to the nation in a different capacity. I am sure we sit here, there are those who are from the Kenya Kwanza realm, and there are those who are from the Azimio realm. People made their decisions, but here we are sitting as this committee by right and beginning to work together towards what is good for the entire country. So I don't think we should discriminate against any individual who may not have succeeded in one situation from taking up an assignment in another position. I want to assure that the issue of delegated legislation is very, very important. And that is why we are putting more emphasis around this need for coordination and liaison and cooperation within ministries and also with greater interface with the National Assembly, and particularly those that will also handle not just all legislation, but even that delegated responsibilities on matters of statute. I want to state here that that holistic approach is what we want to bring in, because it is true when we operate in silos, we create laws and regulations that become a serious problem to the functioning of the economy and delivery of services. So I think that is a very critical anchor in this matter. On the issue of subsidies and maybe broad commentary on the economy, I just want to say that subsidies can be very expensive. They are usually what you might call targeted interventions to try and mitigate on some issues. Some may be short-term, some may be to spur certain economic activity or agricultural activity or production. They are usually short-term interventions targeted. But I want to try and appeal to the nation that we should not become a nation that thrives on subsidies, because they can be very expensive to maintain. Funding of subsidies can be very, very dangerous if your economy cannot sustain it. And a classic example was the subsidy around the petroleum sector. Mr. Chairman, as I speak here, I was the one who actually removed price controls when we were liberalizing the economy, even on petroleum products. And price controls were also a hidden way of trying to introduce subsidies on petroleum products then. And we used to have shortages of petroleum products because people were playing around with that kind of economic regime. So if we want to go forward, we must be very, very careful that subsidies do not become a permanent feature of our economic policy. That is what I would advise, and that is what I'll advise the President and advise the Kenyans on this matter, that we must find better ways in the long run of spurring economic growth and activity so that people can move away from that. And key is to make sure that inflation is tamed. Because the whole issue of subsidies is because somebody feels that something is not affordable. So they're looking for some mitigation. But ultimately, if as a country we can fight and contain inflation, then the urge for subsidies will become less as we go ahead. So I didn't want to make this too much of that, but I was just looking at it as a generality and as something that we need to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you. Daud, the Honorable Daud, the Honorable Mukami, the Honorable Mule, the Honorable Koech. There's still another round.
Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I want to congratulate the nominee, Honorable Mudavadi. Honorable Mudavadi, you've been a minister for local government and you've been in the executive for many, many years. And during your time, prior to the devolution system being in place, there was a sessional paper which you signed off. That was a sessional paper on devolved government under the Constitution of Kenya. And in that sessional paper, 7.3 and 7.5, it talks about the process of intervention, where intervention would be needed in the devolved system of government, and where it states that intervention would be for 90 days and not more. What I want to ask you, in your personal opinion, because you were the author of that document under you, do you think that the devolved system of government has worked as anticipated with regards to revenue and service delivery? And as well as, do you think that under the devolved system, the national government should take over any functions which are assigned to the county government, and NMS was established by the national government, which had 2 years under its wing? Do you think that do we need as a national government to take over any other county in the same manner as NMS? Because if it is possible, then is it 90 days? Because I know that's not your purview, but because being a minister for local government for all those years and in being in the executive, would you advise the president to do what you have suggested in that document? Second question would be for the state corporations. Please, Mr. Speaker. You are aware that many parastatals are not performing the way they should. And you being in charge of the state corporations, as per the mandate the President has given in the executive order, what would you advise the President in folding up the parastatals or state corporations and making a smaller bureaucracy? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Rahab.
Congratulations, Honorable Mudavadi. My question is, one of the roles of the Prime Cabinet Minister is to oversee the national legislative agenda for the Kenya Kwanza government. What are some of your priority legislative proposals and what measures will you put in place to ensure that they are actualized?
Very good. Who was the next? Mule.
Thank you very much. This goes to the nominee. First and foremost is that you're being nominated to one of the positions to coordinate peace, economics, diaspora, environment, culture, diplomacy as a 4 pillar of the Kenyan government. My question is that goes back to where you left on agro-leasing, whereby you say that you are a witness. But is in a public domain, the former CS, Chris Obure, indicated to Judge Ann that you did a letter yourself, which he received on 9th of May, the year 2002, during that hearing, whereby you sought direct procurement of equipments for Postal Corporation of Kenya, and indicated that was the intention of the government to refurb that corporation. My question goes, Mr. Chair, to the nominee, that now you are coordinating the principal secretaries in every ministry who are the accounting officers. I'm afraid, are you going to assure Kenyans you will not return to this habit of direct procurement and instructing them what to do in their ministries? Thank you.
Coach.
First, congratulations, Honorable MUSALIA on your nomination. My question is, one of your tasks, which will include supervising the technical monitoring and evaluating committees of government policies, programs, and projects. Projects across the country were halted for whatever reason, not only in the immediate preceding regime, but even dating back to 2002. In fact, statistics have placed the value of the stalled projects at 9 trillion, which is equivalent to our country's entire economy. The scenario is impacting and negatively on us because we have to pay cost of the delay to the contractors and even making the costs high in the long run. What plans do you have, Honorable MUSALIA MUDAVADI, with regard to the stalled government projects, and possibly if you could give us a roadmap and even possibly timeline? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just start with the issue of devolution. It is true that when the country promulgated the 2010 Constitution, I was tasked with the function of ensuring that the initial legislation, critical legislations to facilitate and actualize devolution were put in place. Now, there is the issue of when can the national government perhaps intervene. And at that time, we looked at the question of 90 days because what we intended to achieve and it still stands, is that the Constitution is very clear that there shall be the national government and there shall be county governments. And any intervention cannot be permanent. An intervention to undertake some corrective measures must be limited, targeted, so that the rights of those people in that county can be restored and they have the ability to govern through their county governments. That is why the intervention period was limited. The issue that we have seen, as in the case of the NMS, all I can say is that maybe we have to wait for the report of the Auditor General at the end of the day to bring out the details of how this particular intervention was run or conducted. But the initial findings that may be in the public domain is that the NMS itself has left a debt of almost 16 billion to the county government of Nairobi. And the nature of how they went in is such that they may not have followed proper procurement procedures along the line. But without casting any ill motive or on any particular thing, I think the report of the Auditor General will be very helpful for us to really discern the experiences of NMS in Nairobi, and also then be able to guide Parliament, guide Kenyans, and guide the county governments on any future interventions, because this is a learning process. We have had devolution now for 10 years. You may notice that even now there is no need, in my view, to have a Ministry of Devolution, because these are entities that are constitutionally provided for, and they should not be interfered with by the national government, but there can be collaboration, and there are mechanisms through the intergovernmental relations legislation that Parliament passed. There are ways that this can be done. On the issue of state corporations, there are many. I think we may be having almost 300 plus state corporations. So that is a portfolio that seriously needs to be looked at very, very critically. And I know this is one of the functions that will fall directly within my purview. And I can say that we will we'll pick up from the reports that are there. There was the famous report by the Abdul Kadir Committee. That is a report that has very useful suggestions on the way forward. But I'll also be saying that, and to also touch on part of the legislation agenda, I will really want to request Parliament to actually just reflect and realize that the privatization program in our country of some of these state corporations has actually stagnated. It has not been moving at all. And I would be calling on yourselves and other critical stakeholders that this is dialogue that we need to have, so that one of the urgent pieces of legislation to kind of accelerate the process of reforming these sectors or the parastatals, that law be urgently looked at and proper consultations undertaken, so that some changes can be made there to improve efficiency and to also disengage the government from areas where losses continue to be incurred, and yet that particular entity may not be necessary to continue holding on to. as the government of the day, because those are public resources. So these are critical areas. Each of these institutions will have to be looked at from a sector viewpoint and also from its individual viewpoint, and it is important that professional advice is really brought to bear in reforming the state corporations. So I've talked of an example of that as one critical piece of legislation. There are legislations that we will have to look at. If we are going to have a hustler fund, it is important that the legal framework be determined quickly. We have to look at what are the existing funds. Are we duplicating? And if you're duplicating, what are the implications? So all these, as an example, would be again a critical piece of legislation to help in actualizing this process of providing greater access to credit by all Kenyans. There are laws that will be necessary, and I want to also appeal laws that will help in dealing with wastage and misuse of resources. These are critical areas that we can review together. And my target is to have legislation that will, to fast-track legislation that will also unlock the economic potential of the Kenyan people, whether in agriculture, whether in manufacturing, whether in trading. So these are the areas that I think we need to look at so that we can have institutions or private sector that is generating jobs as rapidly as is necessary. I want to state that in the issue of diplomacy, we as a nation will have to look more and more to economic diplomacy. Mr. Chairman, I can speak here while looking at somebody who has been the head of our diplomatic missions, business in the country for some time. But economic diplomacy is going to be very critical. What are our interests? We must quickly see how we can benefit from areas like the African Continental Free Trade arrangements. We must look seriously at enhancing our presence and our footprint within the East African Community region, whether you're bringing in the DRC, South Sudan, and how we can network. We must also play a very significant role, because for economic diplomacy to work, there must be peace in this region. So we must be more aggressive in dealing with the issues around Somalia. We'll have to be more aggressive in dealing with the issues even around South Sudan. And I can give an example. For instance, there's a road that the government of Kenya with its partners want to push all the way to Southern Sudan. But there is an issue right up there between Kenya's border and South Sudan that requires urgent political resolution, because that road is supposed to link. So the funding is there, but the process cannot be completed or pushed further because there's still some political issues to be dealt with. So these, to me, are going to be very critical interventions that need to be done. The diaspora, Mr. Chairman, the figures are in the public domain. The Kenyan diaspora, for instance, brings in place into this country almost 480 billion Kenya shillings annually. And the president has, in fact, in designating the issues around foreign affairs, has now brought the issue of the diaspora to the limelight, because that has now become a very critical constituency in the development of our country. We also have to take advantage of things like the climate change programs and play a leading role in those areas. They also provide a platform for a lot of funding if we can work well within those circles. So in coordinating matters around diplomacy, I'll be putting a lot of focus there, while also saying that we need to also continue strengthening our relations with our traditional partners, and make sure at all time the Kenyan interest is covered. We may even want to work more aggressively. There's been an attempt about Kenyans who are suffering in some countries when they get jobs there. These are issues that will require very serious and more robust and high-profile intervention to try and deal with that crisis, so that we can avoid seeing the things we see and we read about Kenyans undergoing very serious problems in different parts of the globe. I just want to repeat the issue around Anglo leasing. I want to state that that matter was canvassed in court. It was dealt with. It is behind us. And even the issues that came up, it was not too long ago that I read in the papers that indeed, even those who are facing trial on some of these issues were acquitted eventually. So it was dealt by the court. And I want to state very critically that ministers, or for that matter, cabinet secretaries, do not engage in procurement. You can talk about policy issues, but there is a procurement law that must be adhered to all the time. The halted projects or stalled projects, this is a crisis, and hence that very important committee of PSS and all the technical people, because we need to have a clear audit of these projects. It's clear that some may no longer be useful to the country, and therefore there's a very serious need for a detailed approach and professional approach to looking at these things, so that decisions can be made and appropriate interventions can be developed. And this also brings to question the serious issue of pending bills in this country, because very many businessmen, contractors in our counties, you know them, some have been crippled because they have never been paid for years. They are suffering. They have families, they have employees, they have loans in banks, but they've been crippled. So as we deal with this issue of stalled projects, one critical issue that we must also address fairly and in a balanced way will be the issue of pending bills in our public entities.
The Honorable Kaliba Misi, the Honorable Ferdinando Wanyonyi, the Honorable Shurie, and the Honorable Gikaria, in that order.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, the problem of asking the last, you find
I hope you are looking at the clock.
Yeah. The problem of asking the last, Chair, is you find all your questions have been asked before. But nevertheless, I've been looking at your CV, Honorable Mudavadi. You were a minister in 1989. That time I was 3 years old. You were Minister for Supplies, Marketing, Minister for Finance, Agriculture, Information, Transport, Vice President. In fact, I remember vividly when you are the Vice President, you presented a check to me to go to Starehe presented by Kenyans living in US. And now I'm serving my second term in parliament. I'm here vetting you for a position that is still mesmerizing Kenyans. Does it portray you as a man who lacks ambition, or is it lack of option? Because you are going to be in a position, head of a cabinet. Kenya is an ambitious nation in the community of nations. We want to portray as an ambitious man who is at the head of the cabinet, the head of helm. Look at this history that spread in 30 years. Does it portray you as a man who does not have ambition? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to ask you very back home that in the previous parliaments we have been actually, as a committee, there has been a tendency of the cabinet secretaries failing to honor summons and failing to respond to matters comprehensively without doing any research, what have you, and in timely manner. In your role, how will you ensure that the committees and sometimes come to parliament? Because we've had these cases where you someone and a cabinet secretary sends somebody else, maybe a junior fellow, and can't even answer comprehensively the questions that you're supposed to be. So are you going to ensure that that is done properly? Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask a question that is important in agriculture. We've had cases where, and now we have this drought, and irrigation is misplaced. Instead of being in agriculture, it's misplaced, it's actually in tourism. It's under blue economy. So are you able to assist to bring irrigation back to agriculture so they can be able to do some of the projects like Kalana Kulano and the rest? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to ask the nominee, how does he want to cultivate a relationship and a good working relationship between institutions that oversight the government, e.g. Parliament and the Office of the Auditor General, with his office and being the Prime Cabinet Secretary together with his cabinet? Thank you.
Okay, Karia.
Thank you, Speaker. Pengine niulize ndugu yetu Wycliffe Mudavadi swali kwa Kiswahili. Unajua serikali ambayo iliondoka ilikuwa na agenda 4 ambazo zilikuwa nzuri sana, lakini haikuweza kutimiza yale maneno ambayo ilikuwa. So serikali ya Kenya Kwanza iko na mambo 5 ambaye italete, na Mkenya wa kawaida ambaye umesema na unampata pale railways anakutazamia wewe katika ile position umepatiwa kuweza kuadimika kwa mambo ya ukulima, mambo ya the micro, small and medium enterprises, mambo ya nyumba, na nyumba tu si nyumba ya kulipizwa, ni ile nyumba ya mortgage ambaye Mkenya ataweza kupata shelter, pengine mambo ya healthcare na hii mambo mengine, creative economy. Wewe katika ile nyadhifa umepatiwa, ni njia gani utaweka mikakati kuonyesha mambo haya yatatimika na Mkenya asiwe tena atakuwa ni mambo ya kungoja kama ile the big 4 agenda ambayo iliwekwa na serikali iliyopita na ikuweza kutimiza? Asante.
Yes, Honorable Mudavadi, the clock is ticking. You can quickly answer those questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start with the issue about ambition. You know, there's Shakespeare, and in his book Macbeth, he made reference to how you should manage your ambition. He called it vaulting ambition. If you can have vaulting ambition and you're not careful, as you try to jump onto the horse, you will land on the other side of the horse. So I am a very pragmatic person. I am ambitious. That is why I'm sitting here. I am ambitious. But it is also important that we manage our ambition as we go forward. That is absolutely critical. And I would like to say that if I'm strong and I am capable and I'm in good health, I think I should bring my experience in public life to bear for the people of Kenya to benefit from it. And that is why I'm sitting before this committee to present myself in that manner. I just want to say that any cabinet secretary that will be avoiding summons of parliament will be doing so at their own peril. Because parliament is so essential, it's so important, and it is absolutely necessary that we develop a respectable and collaborative approach when working with Parliament. I've been in Parliament myself. Some of you may be sitting exactly where I'm sitting in a few years' time, going through this process. And to me, we must cultivate a culture of respecting institutions that have been provided for in the Constitution. That is the hallmark of a good nation. So my view is that I will not hesitate to encourage members of cabinet at all times to make sure that they respect the summons of Parliament and work very closely with Parliament. In fact, perhaps I can also take this opportunity to say, to appeal to the broader Parliament through this committee that perhaps as we go to our 2010 Constitution, there was one very critical thing that we may have done in haste in those days, but perhaps through the appeal made by the President, and I join myself on that appeal, that it may be useful that perhaps you can reflect on the standing orders to bring in even greater accountability from the executive on how they conduct the activities, so that the issues of policy and whatever can be answered ana qua ana by some of these people if need be. So that is something that may be looked at. I would also just want to say that it may be also very useful, unless I'm mistaken, Mr. Chairman, but I was trying to look at why have we been seeing cases where legislation is collapsing a lot in court. And one of the things that has become a Waterloo for many pieces of legislation is the issue of public participation. It is a provision in the Constitution, but I would want to appeal to Parliament to give it more thought so that we can refine that area and figure out what is really public participation, what is adequate, what should be the parameters, because it's still vague. We are going by court rulings largely on this matter. I think some help from Parliament to refine this area might be very, very useful so that we can avoid too many delays of critical pieces of legislation as we go forward. I agree that we must continue looking at functions of government. There's wisdom always from a different perspective when creating the structures and functions of government. And all I can say now before this committee is that it's now going on record that there may be need going forward to review some of the functions and maybe where they are domiciled I would not want to say that the executive order number 1 is cast in concrete. It is a living document that can be reviewed for further efficiency in government in some of the sector areas. I want to state that we must once again take Parliament very seriously. We must take the reports of the Auditor Generals very seriously. We must work in collaboration to help some of the critical independent institutions with the necessary resource. The Auditor General's office needs a lot of support. The budgetary allocation over the last few years has not been commensurate with the kind of tasks that they have. Just the way we saw that the judiciary needed more support, I think also institutions and offices like the Auditor General will need more support because their role of providing audits in a timely manner for all public entities, including county governments, is a very tall order, and they need to be resourced appropriately, financially, technologically, and even in terms of human resource. So these are critical areas. Kwa yale mambo ya agenda 4 zile kubwa, the big 4, kilimo, manufacturing, mambo ya afya na mambo ya kupeana makao ya kiheshima kwa Wakenya, mimi nitasema tu kwamba katika ile manifesto yetu ya Kenya Kwanza, hii agenda ambayo imetajwa hapa imenukuliwa kule ndani, iko kule ndani, na tutazidi kuangalia kwamba wakati pesa za kitaifa zinatengwa ama zitaelekezwa katika sekta hizi, ili tuwe na uwezo wa kuhakikisha kwamba tutatimiza yale ambayo tuliahidi wa Kenya. Nadhani nitakomea hapo kwa wakati huu.
Thank you very much, the Honorable MUDAVADI. 3 minutes and final appeal to the committee in 3 minutes.
My prayers are that you find me suitable to work with you and to work with other Kenyans in delivering service to the people of Kenya. I just want to emphasize that in my role, I want to have a very strong interface with Parliament so that we can find common solutions. We are all there to help the people of Kenya, to serve them, and we cannot serve them by being isolated and living in silos. We must be able to cross the aisle and talk to each other. So this is what I would really want to encourage, and to say that I'll be ready and willing at all times to engage with you, either collectively, as maybe in committees, or even individually as legislators, so that we can find solutions. The final thing I would urge is that we should also remind Kenyans that the challenge ahead of us is very, very serious. It's not a game of flattery to the Kenyan people. It's a question of being honest, being truthful, getting the right information to make decisions, so that we can restore, Mr. Chairman, let us restore trust in government. Let it not be a government of rumor mongering. This is what we want to try and avoid. We want to have an open government. We want to be able to have the facts on the table. Principles of accountability, transparency must be at the forefront of what we do. And also, when looking at the budgets, I would just help that, plead with the Parliament that help us to eliminate something that I kept on calling in my campaigns budgeted corruption. Budgeted corruption. This is something that we all need to fight and deal with. Up to this day, the person I'm going to meet at the railway station will still want to know why would a product cost 100 shillings in the kiosk, and when the government is procuring the same product, it costs 1,000. We must find a way of dealing with this issue. So I'm appealing to members of Parliament that as we go, let's work together, because the executive cannot find these solutions on its own. We have to work together. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Honorable MUDAVADI. The Secretariat will want to have a comparison between your original documents and the certified copies that you have provided. That can be done on the side. This brings an end to your engagement with this committee. I want to thank the honorable members for the wonderful, positive decorum and incisive questions that you have put to the nominee. And if we carry on like this, I think it will be a very, very good idea. You have all conducted yourselves very well. And Honorable MUDAVADI, thank you for answering all the questions candidly. You are now released to go to your other national duties. And the Sergeant-at-Arms can now usher in our next nominee, who is the National Assembly Speaker Emeritus, the Honorable Justin Bedan Njoka Muturi.
Mr. Chairman, can I also leave this document here? I'm sure you have it, but I don't know. The Judicial Commission of Inquiry. Yeah.
You can, yes, you can leave it, submit it as well, part of your documents. I think that is. Bring the Honorable Muturi in 5 minutes so that members who are walking out to ease themselves or to have a cup of tea can.
And
leaders of the House, who is your whip in this regard? Because we want to observe. You yourselves will whip.
Okay. What else do you want? Do you want a publication? You want it?
Na mtazamaji, kama unavyotizama ni shughuli ambayo imetamatika ya kwanza ya kumsaili au kumpiga msasa aliyekuwa kiongozi wa chama cha ANC Musalia Mudavadi, akijaribu kutetea ufaafu wake katika wadhifa wa waziri mwenye mamlaka zaidi hapa nchini. Maswali yamekuwa mengi kwake akiwa kwenye jukwaa na baadhi tu ya wale
ni Wero TV.
ya kupiga msasa wamemuuliza maswali kuhusiana
so budget zaidi na ndio ulimite iria kuri mbere kana uraire makaire
oni budget iji imwe kurutura kurima tugeta mundene ndera bogaiti wone ndere ararima andike ga proti ga kono ndunga sete ria ng'ombe ande ndauga antu akakaraga kiriu apa ande budget ire
onu ntunande
no
pembe chengo biro arime chiri
imbegete sto ga sto kare au nande chirindite au itutoria turambithite twakotho kuria December January au mpembe ke ga kura kairi
nande me tukona gwikithomo tuthomithia ke gwithaithania yani muri mugochitana
gwithainya turia na mundene
mwakuru abati gukira thaa 11 na thaa 11 katikati ka thaa 11 na thaa 12 akaromba akathura kwenda kuina karwimbo ga police ukainina kidogo take shower kidogo kathamba thanu kuthamba rukiri ru between thaa 11 na 6 umenya wi gwaku nyomba utugukuria ugachoka ira urujiro kama ruri ukathithangia ukanenkeria ura witite okama kana ira witite okama toka kitatia ira thaa 12 na thaa mwanka the mwau ukathithia breakfast yeku na kachoruka na barabetite skuru au oathithio au ukajukia twana twaku ugatwikira ngu ukauma au ukajukia breakfast bakanywa na nyago kanywiro ukaba wishimbai ukabateka bagita skuru ethe ibetite barabaikite twana skuru ithara the mona wankatha ijiri we ugachoka nyomba kaire bedroom tije bedroom ni enda tomanto twako na nduka ukataindi ukatandatandika ukabangabangania
mubango jwa nkatha cietu ureterine yetu sako ni ezanaga utungata kiria biashara gukurukira gukiria biashara uguraniri bwa miunda na ngare na kinya uthurania bwa mbesha njagwa na kire biashara yetu sako, your success our pride.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention please?
kuma guciara kwa kenge kaije kiene Weru TV itithuru tutwikura na gutambaja rungu ni untu bwa kuwo mutegeri wetu irinjire mwe gutigira itukugukinyira go mutegeri na njira cionde na ndino wone Weru TV kiri signet na pang free to air sometimes channel 440 Zuku channel 39 Go TV channel 96 na nande turikiri DSTV channel 368 ibwega ni untu bwa gututikia Weru TV rumuri rwa Ameru.
Wendia bomawa
biashara yetethoki ntira launi asola ngoge yonde niko ngentela
entity ya degree in public administration and political science lakini ndio chidira kibione
bata ina wira na bati kweruta na wira cia njara ukachwaga mbeca ciaku na miruta ndena gikeno na inentethetie gwakwa
oninguwe matunda ni tumite on kaimenyero ukona nkari
wira ikwirutaniria na ikumiria wira
ndaruta wira banki imwe batirita nkina tigania wira wikina jana full time nda concentrate na wira wa kuruta chending tutai na mimi simba ya gwita lakini thaini tomba gwita tai na gondu tonketire gwetu thaitu na kutomba gwita gwetu
ingoge bati kwambirwa na gintu milioni 5 10 gwita mbere ngogeje ile ngoge umba kwa ndecha kenda ikai mono na haraka mono nyande school ndenda ngoge njara indi na aciari bongo bara batenda ngoge njara ndathomera accounting
aciari batenda amantu ya salon the moment bikira mtu dreadlocks ikabida kwa after 2 weeks kana 3 weeks ono rire mtu akaja kulitachi mutundu so tero kaga customer ngoge njara ngoge kure ati kompe ngoge je njara na ngoge office
ya enda bango kanda swaga ngoge tai union ko eja na ngoge
bedire to ndi large scale farmer powerhouse gym it's a small gym lakini nio isiariteji this mega gym it's a dream come true ikiroto kioyura ura biblia you are mwathani aomba kutharima beyond your imagination this is totally beyond my imagination
kugenda mianjirire de university Kenyatta University itonda ndina passionate ya kwanjiria ngugi ya beauty dura ngugi ro kona kariro au na winyiri au no mita wina moyo jumwe
kithomo ari na kioge production option
untuburu kwenda kubuthithia ethira we determined vuthira butabwa na arua vuthira butabwa ruju ethira wiji auke mwathani agutethia bugakinyana
kirimurano wagurwa no batikuthwe wina freedom eku
ibwega gukara utifiri na mwendo wa nonto nande piurite kabwa akara gukaranagia no utiumba gutege yani utiumba gukaria muntu munene mutegeri wetu akeja kuthwa ati ku respectete mwire gwe ethiro nyimo ari ukuga nagwe ati uga nagwe kairi kwa ukira kirio katwire akuru betu ibatige kuga nari
boundaries kana me ankante ne anja ogwe we muthoni
na mutoni no ntoni oyu chira chigwatu
kwinjire kwerekania muciari ukamwira te kuigua kera muciari athore
kwena tuketha tukiarairie matuna kumenyera mwekuru
nani mwekuru waku muwite turieto turemba kuigua wamwita akaigua na akenete
untu bubu bakutuma ukainyiria mwana mwanka ketho akiebaebanira mwana gubugatanaia
wi muciari no bati utega ukona kethei mwana umwari agukura mwana umwari na kwenda gutumira twinto twatu tumairo mwana umwari na agoti muguraira
twarece matudara kwamba gwita buchikia mbere ukiona ya ko chiendia
thaira gwitire gwitonye kimuthaka mbere ni atakugura mbere gakambiria ginya gukumena
ugitonya ngura none ri I understanding iriku mwanya abati kwithirwa enayo mama
ugetikiria gutonya ndene ya ngurano utije kethira nkoro yaku niendete muntu ubugwega marriage ikumaneria nontu ningi utina wogeta gwithire mutegeri gwetu maisha jai muteremko
so budget zaidi na ndio ulimite iria kuria mbere kana uraire makaire
oni budget iji imwe kurutura kurima tugeta mundene ndera bwaiti wone ndere ararima andike ga proti ga kono ndunga sete ria ria ng'ombe ande ndo gantu akakaraga kiriu apa ande budget ire
onu ntunande pembe chengo mbiro arime chirindi
imbege ora gastoka leo au kale au nande nchirindite au itutoria turambithite twakotho kuria December January au mpembe kia gakura kairi
nande me tukona gwikithomo tuthomithia yake gwithaithania ni muri guchitana
gwithainya turia na mundene
Watching Reggae Mania on Reroute TV. Yeah, man, with DJ Push.
I'm hanging out with DJ Tush Untamed and Empress Rita right here on Reggae Mania, Weru TV. Don't go nowhere. Lines it up.
Greetings, friends and family. This is yours truly, D Major, representing for DJ Tush and Empress Rita. Seen on Weru TV. Watch out now. It's all about Reggae Mania. Make sure you keep it locked every time. See?
The girl of my dreams and my dream. Wish I didn't wake up.
Yaga yo, it's Anthony B and you're watching Reggae Mania, Weru TV, #1. DJ Tush Untamed, Rita. I'm a king in my castle, yeah. Reggae Mania, Reggae Mania. Yaga yo, it's Anthony B and you're watching Reggae Mania and Weru TV. DJ Tush Untamed, Reggae Rita. Blessings.
Y'all, greetings massive. Watching them and here, this is Daville, aka Tory Mason, and of course you know you're in tune to Reggae Mania and Weru TV with DJ Tush Untamed and Empress Rita. Keep it locked right here. Reggae Mania and Weru TV, you know that's the place to be. Is it? Always on my mind, yeah. Reggae Mania and I'm every time. Yeah, man.
I'm waiting.
Bonde ni anabanjema ciaraga tukiona lakini tweteta mbere tukathira tutikumba kuona
ndege ciecire no ithatu pilot atikinya no ne ukira ukua baria bakuite tweta twoja maiti jaria tukaikira amwe
ingifting ekwa kuma murungu ekudeal na antu na nino monkambite the next step egu change policy.
Tunireka something nitie nguvu bado wanainaka yubo menya manta tatebui
Vamos tangelia mudhiro yontoga babo kale kayokana
nande wajekire wega nale menya indatigire anto ira ciare ngara nimbendo enkone ui
na kwaria ma na sheriro nyombe nyaki lakini utagira tukora wega ninankurite nyo
utotoni mwangu nakumbuka tukiishi mahali panaitwa Kibira.